0 miles of new wall have been constructed. We are still in every Middle Eastern war that we were in when President Trump got elected. We have no significant new trade deals with any major country. Now, we have a couple of bilateral trade deals with South Korea and Vietnam, but nothing on China. USMCA hasn't been ratified. Nothing with the European Union. None of the major promises that were made have even come close to being fulfilled, and actually it's going in the opposite direction. We didn't even get Obamacare repealed. So when I see this just vacuum of empty promises, nothing going on, but it seems like every item on their wish list gets fulfilled, I start to say maybe we have a problem in Washington, D.C. Pretty visual terms. What we have on this side is Make America Great Again. That was the promise, right? That was the slogan. That was the motto. Make America Great Again. That's what we were supposed to be doing. And this is what we've really been doing. You know, this is more what we've actually been doing is making Israel great again. So on the Make America Great Again side, you'll notice there's a lot of white space here. We're talking about major things. You know, I tweeted this out, and I get a lot of baby boomers, bless their hearts, in the replies saying, well, what about this? What about that? I mean, okay, sure, he passed something about the VA, okay? We're talking about major, broad strokes, policy changes. We didn't vote for Donald Trump so that he could pull us out of the Paris Climate Accords. I mean, that was good, but that wasn't one of the core things. We're talking about core promises. What have we gotten so far? The only major legislation is the corporate tax cut. We cut the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%. That was the only significant cut. Now, 90% of Americans did end up getting a tax cut from that, but it was marginal for everybody else. The reality of this tax cut is it was directed at corporations. Even Steve Bannon admitted as much when he was the chief strategic advisor in the White House. He said the play with this tax cut wasn't even to help the middle class. That was something ancillary. That was something secondary. The real purpose of the tax cut was to redirect the supply chain, reorient the supply chains and global commerce away from Asia and the South Pacific, specifically China, and back to North America. So let's call it what it is. It's a corporate tax cut and deregulation when that's doing so well for us. 26,000 point Dow Jones. Really terrific for all the baby boomers and their 401ks. So we've got that. And we've got a few bilateral trade deals, like I said, between South Korea and Vietnam. Everything else, you've basically got nothing. Healthcare hasn't been repealed. The Obamacare in full has not been repealed or replaced. We have 0 miles of new wall. To me, this is the most fascinating because I always assumed that there was new wall being built. Maybe it was fence, but I always assumed that there was a new barrier being constructed. Because if you follow the president on Twitter, you'll see he posts videos or pictures of, look, here's this new structure going up in San Diego, or here's this new structure going up in Arizona. Every mile of new wall, of so-called new wall that has been built under this administration has been replacement wall. All the wall that you see being built, even if it's fencing, whatever it looks like, it's replacing existing fencing. Or the money has been allocated before the president even got into office. So it's 0 miles of new barrier, wall, fence, 0 miles of any new existing structures on the border. Again, you've got no major trade deals. You've got South Korea, Vietnam, but nothing on NAFTA. I mean, we secured the deal, haven't ratified it. Nothing on China, still. Nothing from the European Union. Nothing from Canada. Nothing. And these were the three prongs, and nothing on foreign policy. These were the three prongs of making America great again. You could give me, I'm sure, a host of other accomplishments that I'm not mentioning. Like, oh, he did this thing, or he did that. He did this in this department. He signed this executive order. But the three reasons that we elected Trump, that made Trump different, were number one, he was going to secure the border, and that just hasn't happened. It's gotten worse. He was going to pull us out of the wars. That hasn't happened. Still have 5,400 troops in Iraq. You still have 14,000 in Afghanistan, more than when he got into office. You still have 2,500 in Syria, plus contractors. So nothing on foreign policy. And trade. Trade is the area where he's made the most progress, and even there, it's just about nothing. So making America great again, oh yeah, I know, he passed that one executive order. He triggered all the snowflakes that one time when he said that cool thing. It's empty. There's nothing really significant for him to run on. That was reflected in 2018. Now, on this side, it's a totally different story. On this side, our wish list was pretty big, and we got like two things. On this side, making Israel great again, they got everything on their wish list. Everything that Bibi Netanyahu asked for, everything that their right-wing government asked for, they received. We moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Nobody else was going to do that, but President Trump did. I'm really glad he was able to do that for them. He recognized Jerusalem not just as the existing capital of Israel, but as the eternal capital of the Jewish people. Awesome. We secured $38 billion in foreign aid over the next 10 years for Israel. We revoked all foreign aid to Palestine. And now we're the only country in the world that has no diplomatic relationship with Palestine, which is questionable if that's in our interests. We ripped up the Iran deal. Now, I was actually in favor of that regardless, but it's no secret that that was number one on Israel's priority list. We passed anti-BDS legislation nationwide. So if you're an American citizen, you cannot criticize Israel, you cannot participate in BDS, and have a contract with the U.S. government. We remain in Syria, even though we announced we were withdrawing in late December. We remain there, and we will remain there indefinitely so that we can serve the interest of Israel. And lastly, what came today, the recognition of the Golan Heights. So this in itself is not the biggest deal in the world. It's a pretty big deal. It's pretty significant. But it's like with everything else in the administration, this is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. At a certain point, one grain of sand adds up to a mountain of sand, and you've got basically everything that Israel ever wanted has been accomplished, and they made it happen. Against all odds, they made it happen, but these promises tend to be forgotten or were lied to, or the information is massaged, the promises changed. Actually, now we need the H-1B visa workers, and so on and so forth. And perhaps even more offensive than this, because look, if we're doing things for Israel, but we were also getting things done for our country, honestly, I wouldn't mind. If we were doing all these different things and that was getting us big support from AIPAC and Sheldon Adelson and others, and as a result, we got a big majority in the House and we were able to pass everything we wanted, I would say that's a cost of doing business. Because you know what? There's a lot of nationalist governments in the world that have the support of the Zionists. You have Bolsonaro in Brazil, you have Salvini in Italy, you have, I think it's the Prime Minister in Austria. There's a very good relationship with a lot of these nationalist governments. So if we were getting everything done, and then we also happen to have this, I would say, is that the end of the world? Probably not. I think there's a case to be made for a lot of these things. But the slap in the face is that obviously it is a one-way street. We can do nothing for our own people, but we can do everything for a foreign people. On top of that, even this is not reciprocal. We saw that in late December, and I found this when I was doing research for tonight's show. In late December, when the president announced that he was going to withdraw all troops out of Syria, do you know who opposed that in the strongest terms, in the most harsh terms? It was AIPAC. So mind you, in December 2018, all of this had been achieved, with the exception of anti-BDS and the Golan Heights recognition. All of this had been achieved. And so the president tweeted out, okay, well, there's really no reason for us to be in Syria anymore. It's time for us to bring our troops home. And AIPAC turned on a dime. All that goodwill, all these benefits that we brought to these people, everything that we did, every item from their wish list that we sprinted to achieve, they turned on a dime the second it didn't work out for them. The second they didn't like what they were hearing at AIPAC, they said, this is a disaster. This is emboldening ISIS. We can no longer support the president. So you see that not only is it a one-way street in the sense that only one country seems to benefit from this administration, but on top of that, we do all these different things and we get nothing in return. What did the president say at his first press conference with Bibi Netanyahu in the first year of his administration? He said, we like to help you, we like you, but could you relax with the settlements? That was more or less what he said to the prime minister's face, to Benjamin Netanyahu's face at this press conference. We like you, we support you, but maybe you could relax with the settlements in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, because at the time, President Trump, Jared Kushner, and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia were trying to put together this grand Middle Eastern peace deal, and they were trying to make everything work. Did that happen? The opposite happened. Within months, they had the record-setting biggest expansion of settlements in Israel's history. So you see, there's many examples of this, that we can basically do everything that they want and we get nothing in return. And that's what's wrong with it. Why did we establish the United States of America? In 1776, I recall the object of declaring independence was to break away from a tiny country across the ocean, far away from ruling our own country. I thought that was the whole object of America. And here we are 250 years later, and it seems like we're back to square one. So that's the whiteboard. I don't think it gets any more honest than that. It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. And nobody else will say this. Nobody in the conservative movement has the guts to say this. And I've had to shame a lot of people. I don't know. Some people have come around. I don't know if that's because, they're just maybe sort of growing balls or something. Or maybe they see my posts and they're like, I feel bad on the inside. But why do we have right-wing people at all if they can't stand up for American sovereignty? I don't understand this. Because the message seems to be, every time I go to D.C., the message is, what you have to do is you have to kiss Israel's ass, and then in exchange, you get connections, you get money, and you're able to spread your own message. Well, that's a non-starter, because my message is American sovereignty. They're mutually exclusive, obviously. You cannot at once bend the knee to a foreign country, to a foreign interest, to a foreign power, to facilitate the spreading of your message. It doesn't work like that if the message is America's independence, America's sovereignty. So shame on everybody who comes around, oh, we love Israel, we gotta have Israel, all this other stuff. I will never bend the knee. I will never bend the knee to this country. I think what they're doing in there is admirable. I think what they're doing in Israel, they have a great model. Their nation-state law, what they do, it should be replicated. They understand that. That's why they're supporting nationalists in other countries. But America has a unique relationship with this country. It has to be talked about. It couldn't get more obvious anymore, the way that they do this. You saw it with Ilhan Omar. You see it with this stuff on this whiteboard. It has to stop. We can be closest allies. We can have a great relationship, but it's got to be a two-way street. It cannot continue like this. Nobody talks about it, and you know why that is. So that's our relationship there. So that's the whiteboard. We're going to get also into the strategic element because this is only one angle on this particular example. But I do want to get into some of the specifics of this announcement in particular, how this pertains to the larger situation in Syria. So the president recognized the Golan Heights. A little bit of background on this. The Golan Heights is a very strategically important area, formerly in Syria, I guess. Now it's technically in Israel. It was conquered during the 1967 Six-Day War. In 1981, Israel formally annexed the territory. And the reason they did that is because geopolitically, it's important for Israel to have that so that they can have, obviously, a military advantage to have that little piece of land inside Syria. But it's also important because it has important resources like water, and it also has natural gas and petroleum resources. So it's very important. That's why they're occupying it. They have a military occupation, and now they're settling it with civilian settlements. So it's a formal annexation of this territory. Now, I don't know how I feel about that in general. If we weren't in the Middle East, it wouldn't really matter who has what heights and who has what hill and mountain and everything else. But you understand that when we have 2,500 troops in Syria, it becomes sort of relevant. So what we saw earlier this week is that the announcement was made that we're keeping 1,000 to 1,500 residual troops in northeastern Syria. Why did we announce that we were doing that? We're not seeking regime change in Syria anymore. So if you have this country where the civil war has basically been won, Assad has taken control over the entire country with the exception of, I think there's a small holdout in the north near Aleppo. So there's a little holdout that's remaining, but the civil war is basically over. ISIS has been defeated. Turkey is making some moves with the Kurds in the north, but the civil war is over. The country is coming together. We're not seeking to depose this leader. So then why do we remain in Syria if we're not even killing ISIS anymore and we're not going against Assad? Well, the reason that any country would want to remain like that is because they want to have some say in the peace process. The reason that America has 1,500 troops, we actually have 2,500 troops in there now, but the reason we're going to keep a residual force is because we want to say in the future of Syria. It's leverage. So that when Assad finally secures the rest of the country and they're going to pick up the pieces and say, what is the future of Syria in the next couple of decades, America can say, well, we need to have a seat at the table and you're going to give it to us or else we're not going to leave.